people are.
They don't.
Yes.
All right,
Run right over.
we're up.
Good morning from the Ann Springs Close Greenway. It is so good to be out in nature today, and I am Elizabeth Bowers, the Communications Director for the Greenway. I'm here with Andy Kane, the Greenway's former board chair and our local conservation expert, and we're here to talk about Piedmont Prairies, which might not mean a lot to you right now, but I think by the end of this chat, you'll know more about it and why the Greenway thinks it's so important to conserve and why we've been doing a lot to bring it back. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy, and we're excited to go on our first virtual hike with you guys.
Absolutely. Well, we got a beautiful spring morning, and we're here at the Ann Springs Close Prairie. It's our best kept secret, apparently, because a lot of people, I'll talk about the prairie and they'll go, prairie? What prairie? Well, we're going to explore the prairie a little bit today and help y'all get to know it a little bit better. And I challenge all of you to come down here and tour the prairie. And once we are in a normal world again, I'll be happy to lead many hikes down here so we can explore this together. First of all, I want to talk about the history of the prairie and how we got this prairie. There is a plant that grows in York County and very few other places on earth. In fact, just a small area around York County. And it's a beautiful sunflower called the Schwannett sunflower. And this time of year it's about this big, but later in the summer it'll grow up and be a pretty robust 5 to 7 foot tall, sometimes even a 10-foot tall sunflower. Pretty little yellow sunflower. So there was some land being developed in this region, and they found Schwannett sunflower on it. And they came to the Greenway and said, can we find a site at the Greenway where we can maintain the Schwannets where it likes to be maintained? What it likes to be maintained on is an area that is either bush hogged or burned every year or so. And Josh Patterson, our natural resource director, has done a great job of taking care of this prairie. We're about, I think, 22 years into managing this prairie. And this is done in collaboration with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that manages endangered plants and animals in this country. So I want you to go back or picture in your mind being on this property 500 years ago and in this region. Back then, there were lots of prairies, and the prairies here were maintained by large grazing animals like woodland buffalo, elk, deer, and also by natural fires. When the lightning would strike, it would start a fire and the fuel would pump it up and it would run across the Piedmont Prairies. It was also maintained by the Native Americans. The Native Americans would intentionally set fires. Why would they do that? The reason they did that is that they knew that prairies provided a wide diversity of foods for people, but also for the grazing animals and the rabbits that they like to hunt. So a prairie will be an area that's rich in food. It'll have lots of seeds later in the season and lots of flowers. And the flowers provide pollen and nectar for a lot of pollinating insects, which as people right now we're very concerned with. And a lot of these plants provide food for forage. So if you could imagine somebody coming to you and saying, hey, would you rather subsist on a loaf of bread, or would you like to go to Whole Foods and get a whole variety of food? Well, a prairie provides great diversity of plants and animals that sustain wildlife on the Ann Springs Close Greenway. Right now, we've got this 9-acre prairie. Josh and company are currently converting over twice as much of our land into additional prairies. So we've got ideas for expansion. If we look right in back of us here, there's an area that was previously mowed probably a couple of times a year, and So we started questioning, why are we mowing these areas? Nobody really walks on these areas. Why don't we just let them grow up and be not a prairie that's managed like this one, but let it convert back to the native species. And if you let land like this keep going and you just bush hog it once a year, it will start to favor the native plants in favor of like the fescue. If you look over on this side of the road here, this is a fescue field. And fescue is a grass. It's a northern European grass that grows very well here. The advantage of it is it can be cut for hay several times a year, and it's used to feed our horses and some of the cattle that we keep here at the Greenway. It's a great use for livestock. It's not a productive area for pollinating insects and birds and snakes and little field mice and rabbits that the prairie help to support. A little bit later in the season, if you come out here and you walk down this road, you can contrast looking at this fescue field compared to looking at the prairie, and just try and notice the subtle things that are going on in the prairie, and maybe they're going on at the fescue field, but at a much lower degree. In other words, a little bit later today, and even later in the season, better, when more flowers are blooming, you'll see lots of butterflies, bees, wasps, and dragonflies. Typically we think of dragonflies as working over a pond. They'll go back and forth over a pond to get those insects that are associated with the pond. Well, on the prairie, because of all the insects that are attracted to the prairie, the dragonflies like working the top of the prairie and gathering up those insects and eating them up. So, Elizabeth, why don't we take a little walk?
Let's go. You can
go down the
already
middle of
see
the
how
prairie.
much more diverse it is, even this early in the season.
Yes.
And morning is definitely the time to come out here. I mean, it's just beautiful with the morning view and everything.
Yes.
Do you know what this little yellow flower is?
Yes, this is the most common flower that we have blooming right here. This is ragwort, and ragwort is an aster, and it is designed by nature to be a nice landing platform for butterflies and pollinating insects. Not only is the flower itself nice and flat, but even this cluster of flowers at the top, it's a perfect place for an insect to get on there and just go from flower to flower. And ragworts are a pretty good indicator that you've got a piece of property that's good for a lot of different pollinating insects. We're going to go right down the middle of the prairie. And when you're out here walking on the prairie trails, you got to be careful because we share this with bikers, and many times I've almost been obliterated by the bikers. Yes. Yeah, why don't you tell them the logistics of it?
So this is the Adventure Road entrance. This is very popular for mountain bikers, as Andy mentioned. You park right at the front of the entrance, and you can walk down past the field trial barn, right past Stumpy Pond to get on the Prairie Loop. So that's where we are. Andy mentioned it's a mountain bike trail, which is all of our trails are hiking trails, but we share them with bikers and equestrian users in other parts of the Greenway. So we're always mindful of sharing the trail, now more than ever with social distancing. So make sure that you are paying attention. We want you to come out here and disconnect, but make sure you're not so disconnected that you forget what's going on. Right, Andy?
I'm keeping my distance.
That's right.
This is a good place to talk about the prairie and how it operates and why it's so important. Why do we burn the prairie, you ask? Burning is really important to the prairie because it kind of resets the entire ecosystem. One of the things that it does that's very important is it knocks back these woody plants like this little oak. And we are definitely a tree-loving group here at the Ann Springs Close Greenway, but if we let this prairie go by its own designs, it would be grown up in trees in a very few years. So we've got oak trees, and we've got sumac and a lot of different trees that would take over if we let it go. The other thing that goes on in the prairie is that unlike a fescue field or a hay field, there are turf grass, and the turf grasses are very thick. These grasses, these native grasses, later in the summer, they'll be about this tall, and they're called bunch grasses. And the bunch grasses create tunnels between the bunches of grasses. And those tunnels are great places for birds, especially like quail and other ground nesting birds, and rabbits and little mice. I know some people aren't crazy about mice, but field mice proliferate in here, and they're a really good food source for some of the predators that will work the prairie. It's almost unheard of to walk through the prairie and not see at least one hawk looking for something good to eat. So these grasses, instead of it being one type of grass here, there are probably 5 or 6 different native grasses. And native grasses are good for many reasons. They provide really nutritious food. And the other thing is they get very deep rooted. Some of these grasses can go down 6, 8, and even 10 feet over the years, unlike a turf grass that might go down maybe 1.5 to 2 feet. And what happens in that process is it loosens the soil up. It adds a lot of organic matter to our depleted Piedmont soils, and makes just a rich environment for different species out here. All right, let's carry on. Oh, look at here, Elizabeth. This is what we don't like to see at the Greenway. Our friends, the Argentine fire ants.
Oh.
And you kick the mound and they come out, and of course they're not coming out for me this morning. But there is a fly that has been introduced to try and control the fire ants, called a phorid fly, P-H-O-R-I-D, and they will hover around the fire ant nest, and when a fire ant comes out, they'll come and land on top of them and lay their eggs, and then they turn the ants into sort of zombies. They go down into the nest and it kills them. I've never seen one, but I look for them all the time, and they are in South Carolina. They were introduced by some researchers at Clemson University. All right, let's carry on. There are a couple of interesting flowers here that are in bloom. Early spring flower is this little European flower. This is a chrysanthemum, like the mums. It's got a great scientific name, Chrysanthemum leucanthum. I don't know why I like that. They can be a little bit invasive, but for the most part, it's just a nice little daisy that grows out in the prairie. A good little pollinating flower for the early spring. Here's another one here. There are a lot of them blooming right now. This is great for the early pollinating insects. Have any idea what that is?
I don't.
This is a blackberry flower. So we've got a lot of blackberries in here, and the blackberries will grow very high, very quickly, because they've been here for years and they're deep rooted. Josh has to, that's one of the reasons we burn, because this would just be a big old blackberry thicket in about 2 or 3 years. So this year he bush hogged the prairie. He did not burn because of the virus. There was a burn ban pretty early on. They didn't want any prescribed burning going on, but we have so many other things to worry about. this right here, when this trail was built, Josh was all laid up with a broken arm from a injury he sustained out here while felling a tree. And the trail builder got a little confused on where the trail should go, so he put it right through the prairie. And Josh was a little bit miffed with that, and I gotta admit I was too, but now it's wonderful having this trail go through the middle. But what we have here, Elizabeth, is a little borrow pit that the trail builder took in. Do you run out of power? No. That the trail builder created to build the trail up, and we were like, oh my gosh, he dug all these holes in the prairie. Well, the good thing about this is, again, a little disturbance, and what we have here is we've created some little wet weather pools, and after it rains real hard, there'll be some water standing here, and then this mud will be here for weeks. And mud is very good for a lot of insects, for wasps and butterflies and moths. They like to go to mud to get their moisture rather than going to a water source. They also get some minerals when they're sticking their little spout down in there. So little mud holes, and these are also good for some reptiles, some amphibians to reproduce, like toads. Here's another one, and this one is already being inhabited by some of our nice native flowers here. Elizabeth, come pick one of these leaves right here from this big rhubarb looking thing. If you can, it might be too hard to...
That's exactly what I have in my yard.
Yeah, it looks like...
I said it looked like rhubarb. Is that really what it is?
No, it's not rhubarb. But this is... Do you have this in your yard at home?
I do.
Well, great. This is a great example of a native plant that you should encourage in your yard. You're not going to find it at the garden center. This is a native sunflower. It's called rosinweed or silphium. Makes beautiful big fig-like looking leaves. It looks a little bit like a rhubarb, and the veins on those leaves and the stalk will turn deep purple and red. So it's a beautiful plant, and if that isn't enough, later in the summer it will make some really tall stalks of sunflowers that are about that big. So what are sunflowers good for? They attract a lot of birds and a lot of insects. Goldfinches have already gone through their plumage stage. They're already turning yellow again, the males, and they love the seeds of the sunflowers, especially the silphium. So here's another one growing right here. They grow on these really waste areas. They create a tremendous taproot for a flowering plant, and it is a perennial. They come back from the roots every year. So bonus. Don't have to go back to the garden center and buy another and another. See, and they're all over. Yeah, and I think we have the best crop of silphium of any property that I know of in this area. So that's something to be very happy about. So now we're in a little wooded area, and this is a unique wooded area. I've got to give credit to Bill Steele, because Bill, who worked here for many years, was the architect that created this prairie, and he maintained it for many years and did an excellent job of creating one of the best Piedmont prairies in the region. Mecklenburg County Parks also has some great native prairies that they've created. What Bill started doing in this forest is, instead of only burning the prairie resource, the open area, he let the fire, managed fire, go all the way down to the stream. So what you have when you do that is you change the species composition of the forest. one thing that's happening with a lot of our upland forests right now is we primarily have oak hickory forests in this area, in the uplands. And what's happening is, because we've done such a thorough job of controlling any kind of fires, the upland areas are converting to maple and beech, which are wonderful trees, but they're very shade tolerant, and they start to choke out the oaks and the hickories. Why is that important? The reason that's important is because the oaks and the hickories are the trees that provide the most food in a forested area. So in this area here, the pine trees do very well, the hickory trees do well, persimmons and oaks, because they've got thicker bark and they're adapted to withstand fire. So you'll see a precious few red maples in this area and no beech. So traditionally the beeches and the maples were confined more to the wet areas when fire was a dominant factor in the area. So I love the appearance of this forest. It's a nice open forest. And when the first settlers came, there is documentation of people riding their horses through these beautiful savannas of huge trees and almost a void of a shrub layer. So it's something that we're trying to create here more and more at the Ann Springs Close Greenway. Pine trees are very well adapted to fire, and Josh and his crew have been burning some pine trees over by the Lake Hager, and that becomes a very interesting ecosystem once that fire is incorporated. Let's keep going. So here's a little, Elizabeth, here's a little wash area here. The water is concentrating here. We've got some beautiful plants growing right up in here. You know what these are?
I do not.
Okay, come feel them and see if you can just run your finger all the way up. You can tell they're round. So these are rushes, and rushes are wetland plants. If I think that if Josh was not burning this on a regular basis, that these rushes wouldn't be doing so wonderfully. They're blooming right now. They're in full bloom, and they're doing spectacularly. But they do like some sunshine, and the periodic burning down here is helping the rushes. These are some of the most beautiful rushes, aren't they?
Yeah. You see
rushes are round.
Rushes are round. Okay.
And sedges have edges. So you feel the bark on this tree, Elizabeth. That's a nice, thick bark. This is one of our most drought-tolerant oak trees. This is a southern red oak, a magnificent oak. Unfortunately, you don't see this at the nature centers either. I really encourage people to rely on native plant nurseries for getting their specimen trees. This is a wonderful tree that is easy to grow. You can always, this is a good project to do with your kids also, Elizabeth, is collect some acorns, grow them in pots for a year, and then put them out in your yard.
Wow, yeah, that would be great. Southern red oak.
And it makes a really nice fall color too.
Okay.
See if you can grab one of those leaves. The bottom of those leaves should be kind of fuzzy, and they are later in the season. They also get to be very leathery, and leathery and fuzzy are two adaptations for leaves to help them conserve moisture in the really dry, hot summer.
Okay.
And we are on an upland area here, so this is the perfect place for the southern red oak. And right over here, this is a really nice shrub. Go down there, let's see if you can see any blooms or fruits. Because this is a plant that produces really nice food, and it's doing better because of the fire as well. A little bit more sunshine. This plant grows on very acidic soil. This is not a blueberry, but closely related to a blueberry, like a sparkleberry.
Okay.
I get tongue-tied early in the morning.
Sparkleberry. I have never heard of that.
Yeah. Or a huckleberry.
A huckleberry. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
You can see these sweet gum sprouts coming out from this tree. That's a sign that it's being stressed by the burning. Take a handful of those leaves, Elizabeth, and just break them up and smell them. You got a descriptor of that?
Kind of lemony.
Yeah, a little bit lemony. To me, it smells almost a little bit like turpentine.
Yeah.
And I always encourage people that, especially with kids, but I tell you, adults like the same thing children do. I encourage you when you go out to smell things as you're starting to learn different plants, and just be careful you're not doing that with poison ivy.
Right.
Yeah, bad idea.
Yeah. Leave it through. Let it be. We have another great tutorial that we've already done on that. Spotting poison ivy. This certainly is doing it for us. Some healthy variety.
This is a verbena that's growing up. Typically they sprout more from the ground, and these are coming up. One of the best pollinating plants is a verbena. Makes small, kind of bluish purple flowers. It is loved by butterflies. This is a great attractor for butterflies.
And it smells good.
And it smells good. Somebody sent me a picture of this plant recently, and there was a whole cluster of them. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
Is it
I
thistle?
saw one over there, but we couldn't get to it. What is it?
It doesn't look like something you want to grab onto, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It is very prickly, and our farmer would not like this over in his hayfield. He would try and get rid of it, because this is not something that would make good hay. And it is somewhat invasive. This is a thistle, and there's a number of different species of thistles. One of them, and I don't know if that's one of them, I think that's one of the native ones, but one of them is more of a Eurasian plant. But this is a very good butterfly nectar source in the summer, and these little seeds here are eaten by finches if they'll let go. So finches, this is good finch food. So thistle.
Thistle. It almost looks like a sweet gum just sitting on top of that thing like that.
Yeah, that does look like it. Oh, there's a grasshopper. You see him? So the prairie is rich with a lot of different types of insects, and grasshoppers are very important for birds. For wild turkeys, the grasshopper is like filet mignon, and in a couple of months, when this prairie is this big, if you come out here early in the morning, it certainly wouldn't be unusual to see a group of turkeys out here looking for those big, juicy grasshoppers. Be a good thing to feed your kids too, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So what time of the year do we typically bush hog?
Typically in the winter or early spring, and one of the reasons you want to let your prairie go through the winter is that it's a very important area. Since it's big and thick and there's a lot of cover here, it's a really important area for a lot of songbirds. Songbirds really rely on these rough areas to go to be in the rough to get away from the winds and the predators. And when it's a real rainy day, they'll hunker down and stay low in there because it's a nice, safe area. Unfortunately, we are a society that likes clean and manicured, and we try to mow everything. One of the things we have been doing at the Greenway for a long time is what, Elizabeth?
Mindless mowing.
Mindlessly mowing. And a couple of years ago, we started thinking about some of the areas we were mowing, and we were mowing areas that were nobody walked on, nobody played on it. It was just an area that we were mindlessly mowing. So there's a new regime here where areas where people don't walk, and we certainly mow areas where people walk in high intensity areas for our campers, but on areas that are just open areas, like right when you come in the gate for the Adventure Center on the left, that was an area that was just sort of mowed on a regular basis. And now it's mowed once a year, bush hog once a year, to keep it from converting into a forested area. So those mindlessly mowed areas, they're not prairies, they're not meadows, but they are converting more to native plants because the fescue does not like to be mowed only once a year, because when it gets really hot and dry, it wants to be cut down so it's not relying on so much moisture. So you're reducing the top of the plant, and it doesn't need as much moisture. So it tends to kill the fescue, but it could take a long time to get it knocked down pretty good. All right. You doing all right on time?
We are. I think we're it's past 9. What
Oh, it is.
what have we not covered yet, Andy?
Well, we could spend most of the morning out here, and we would see something new on every turn. But I will wrap it up. I just want to say a couple of things that I think is very important, just as kind of a recap. A prairie offers diversity, and diversity is very important in ecology. It's important to people, and it's important to wildlife and insect populations. So what we have here is a very diverse prairie. One of the things I like about it is every week as we go on, it's something different. Every year, it's a new prairie. When it's burned, when it's bush hogged, it resets the clock, and something different happens the next year. So I would encourage our members and friends of the Greenway to, in the future, enjoy the prairie. Think about maybe some resources in your neighborhood. Maybe you own a little plot of land that you're mindlessly mowing, that the kids aren't out on all the time, that you could talk to us about converting it to a once a year mowing situation. You will be surprised what your native seed bank might wake up. So thank you all. Be safe out there, and we're delighted that the Greenway's back open for social distancing and enjoying not just the prairie, but all the trails and streams we have out here.
That's right.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, guys.